When I used to interview recruiters, I used to always ask them, what happens when a candidate tells you no, right? The yes is easy. Probably the most important variable right now for recruiters in this market, and it's speed. And if HR is truly going to earn a seat at the table, which they largely haven't earned, it's going to be speaking the language of the business. Interviewing is all about mitigating risk, right? That's the whole 9 yards. I think a lot of recruiters are lazy. I think a lot of recruiters rely on inbound. They just reverse engineer with a little bit of data to know their pass-through rates, and they rely on an employer brand or a global household name to do their job for them. That's why I think recruiting is not a one-size-fits-all profession. And I think we're going to see the cream rise to the crop in the next couple of years for folks that really have the chops to do this and make it a career like you for the last 20 plus years.
There we go.
All right, what's up, everybody? I'm Brandon Jeffs. I am the host of the Revel TA podcast. I'm here with David Malloy. David is the Vice President and GM of Talent Consulting and Transformation at Findem, where he helps organizations modernize recruiting through AI and data-driven strategies. He previously served as the Global Head of Talent Acquisition at Nutanix, scaling the company through rapid growth and major transformation. More than 2 decades of experience in TA leadership, David's built high-performing teams, designed inclusive hiring programs, and advised executives on how to align talent strategy with business outcomes. Today, he's recognized as a thought leader on the future of work, the ethical use of AI in recruiting, and the power of data to drive smarter workforce decisions. What's up, David?
Hey, Brandon, good morning.
I'm psyched to have this conversation, man.
Well, I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
So we're out here on the floor in beautiful Las Vegas, Nevada. HR tech is an interesting time. How many times have you been out here? I feel like you've been around the industry for a while. Like, what is the vibe?
Yeah, a lot of energy here. It's a great event. It's high caliber. A lot of I just in the last 24 hours, the amount of just conversations I've had with thought leaders here, it's really energizing.
You know, I've never met a stranger, and what's really cool is once you start showing up at the conferences, you start to make new friends very quickly in this industry. Talk a little bit about the relationships that you've had and what it means to you.
Oh gosh, I mean, I think about especially in a time where things are changing so rapidly, to have that your tribe of folks to be able to reach out to respected folks who do what you do or trying to do what you do in this new AI driven economy. I think that we're kind of a unique group of people, and only us understand us. I guess that would make sense, but I think the relationships are everything as we're kind of navigating these seismic shifts together through the industry.
Yeah. You mentioned being a business guy and being like the least HR guy. Talk a little bit about that. I relate.
Yeah, I always joke. I say in high school, I would have definitely not been voted most likely to end up in HR. I actually started out my career in sales. Prior to that, I grew up in family businesses, restaurants, things like that. So began to, really deal with the public at an early age. I think that I happened into talent acquisition like a lot of other people do. I was in sales. The company I was with was moving away from, or my primary manufacturer that I represented was going to go direct with the sales force. So it was my first experience putting my resume out to a headhunter, which I'd never heard of. One thing led to another. I ended up in the industry. But I think because of my sales background, I kind of view the whole talent acquisition function very much like a sales kind of a motion.
I think so too. When you break it down, the candidate funnel, the process looks very similar to, say, an SDR.
Yeah.
I come from a world where I have to source the candidates for the roles that I work and fill. How do you think recruiters can benefit from thinking about their role more as a sales and marketing and storytelling function?
Yeah, I think what's interesting is that AI is creating the lift that they need to have the space to be able to really create those indelible experiences with the candidates. So obviously, there's a lot of talk about the implications of AI on the recruiters and what the future of recruiting looks like. But if you think about it, recruiters spend 85% of their time stuck kind of at the administrative level, whether it's sourcing or researching, whatever it is that they're doing. At Findem, we automate that. So the question is, how do you use that time differently? Do you use that time differently? And I think the idea is we talk about automating, the IQ to focus on the EQ.
Mm.
So I think used properly, it eliminates the high value or the high effort, low value, so we can spend our time differently. And if I think about in a kind of a time where many of us, if you think about engineering roles in tech, everyone's looking for the same types of profiles. How do you differentiate yourself? How do you get your unfair share of talent? And a big piece of it is that experience that the recruiter is going to provide, right? So if you've got a recruiter who's overloaded and they're spending all their time sourcing, they're probably not spending the time to really articulate, the mission, the vision, what's so important, what's so special about their company, which makes the biggest difference. When I used to interview recruiters, I used to always ask them, what happens when a candidate tells you no, right? The yes is easy, but what do you do, right? What's the experience? Do you take a moment and say, hey, listen, I hear what you're saying, but let me give you 3 compelling reasons to maybe just continue on this conversation, right?
Love it.
And really talk about that. So I think that the over indexing again on things like storytelling, prepping, right? They don't understand your company's culture. It's not about telling them how to get the job. It's just helping them navigate in a culture they don't understand. I think those are the things that are going to be most important moving forward.
So let's talk a little bit about technology. What is Findem working on right now that you're excited about?
Yeah, we're working on a lot that I'm excited about. In May of this year, we signed a partnership with Recruit Military.
Amazing.
I think this is just a great example of the power of AI. So, Recruit Military is an organization that helps transitioning servicemen and women move into private sector jobs. For years and years, they tried to translate what is a machinist mate in the military. What does that equate to in the corporate world,
Mm.
right? And it was difficult to do. So, we've partnered with them to map out what is a machinist mate, in the corporate or in the private sector. What are the comp bands? What are the 6 other roles that they could do, with their skill set?
Totally.
So being able to really help make that transition, and there are a lot of companies that are super passionate about hiring veterans. They just don't understand where and how the skill sets line up, and it's much more. There are many more matches than people would assume at surface level.
Now, when you think about Findem, how do you differentiate the product from all the other sourcing tools out there? I look out at the conference and in the expo hall, there's tons of sourcing vendors.
Yeah.
How is Findem differentiating themselves from the pack?
Yeah, and there are a lot of high quality vendors here. Agree with that. Our founders were big data guys, right?
Okay.
So they recognized a problem within our space. And if you think about AI today, the data was built for human consumption.
Yep.
Not for the machines, right? So we have the most robust set of labeled data, by experts that exists in the world. So I think that's a differentiator. And then 3D data.
Nice.
So what we do is we enrich a profile to create more context. And I'll give an example. If let's say that your hiring manager wants you to find a sales rep who is accustomed to high-paced environments and high growth. Okay. You start doing your sourcing, you come up with candidates. Everyone says high growth, right? What we'll do is we'll take a candidate, we'll take a look at the company they work for.
Yep.
The time that they spent there, and we're overlaid like their financial data or their headcount growth.
Yeah, that's
So
great.
I'll be able to say, hey, Brandon worked at this company. This were 20% growth per year.
Yep.
They headcount grew by X. So this kind of lines up that he is a person who's been through a time of high growth. Another story I gave as an example a few months ago at a conference was I used our head of HR, Amanda. So we're a smaller company, but we're growing rapidly. So we wanted somebody who had, the chops to endure all the startup.
Oh, sure.
Growing pains, but somebody who could grow with us. So if you were to take a look at what her background was, the company, she's worked at smaller companies, she's worked at larger companies, but it really measures what you've endured. She went through COVID. She went through the Great Resignation. So you can see the dips in the company's headcount where she was head of HR. She's seen some stuff, right? So for us, it just was, I think it ups the chances of success because it provides context. One other thing, like imagine you're looking for a CFO, you find a CFO candidate, but you're a 200-person organization. They came out of a 100,000-person organization. Just provides a little bit more context.
And when I think about this in the recruiting and sourcing process, it's indexing on probably the most important variable right now for recruiters in this market, and it's speed.
Yeah.
You can get that information through research, but if it's at the very top of the funnel on your shortlisted outreach candidates or your shortlisted candidates to outreach in the software, it helps recruiters be more efficient. So instead of perhaps 100 outbound messages, they're sending 25 really targeted messages that are going to get a 60 to 80% reply rate.
Yeah. But I'll kind of touch on a couple different topics related to that. If you think about the market we've been in for the last couple of years, it's an employer's market. Post a role, you're going to get 1,000 replies in a day. And again, because of time constraints or the lack of technology, that recruiter is juggling, like 12 to 20 different requisitions. If there are 1,000 candidates, they're going to move through as many as they need to get to their 3 to 5 submits. Yep. If that's 100, the question is what happens to the other 900? Yep. And a lot of times the answer is nothing. So I think that from a diversity perspective, you're not looking at the entirety of the pool, right? So with technology, we sit on top of an ATS. We can analyze all of the applicants. We take a look at people that are in your ATS, which are often overlooked, and they say 85% of hires made are already somewhere in your network, right? So we'll take a look at that. We'll take a look at if you've got an internal mobility, people within your company that can do the job. We look at alumni, all these different things. So we're able to, batch review 1,000 at a time and then bubble up and think of it as like good, better, best, right? It's not a stack ranking, more of kind of bucketed. And then for the candidates who may not be a fit, we can invite them into a talent community, or we can send them a humane disposition note, letting them know, hey, look, this one's not going to work out, but join our talent community, stay in touch, that kind of a thing, right? So when you think about the implication from a diversity perspective, from a time perspective, and then you take a look at the supporting NPS surveys that go out to candidates, to hiring managers, even to recruiters, technology just pushes that up really, really high, right? The recruiters are happier because they can do their job more effectively, better. It's really a force multiplier. The hiring managers, of course, love the fact that they're going to get, as you pointed out, like quality candidates, right, that meet what they're looking for quickly. And candidates, they want to feel that they've had a fair opportunity, that they've been evaluated.
When I think about this idea of technology bucketing candidates to outreach from a database as good, better, best versus stack ranking, why is that the product decision versus perhaps a ranked top 10 list where you're assigning a candidate to a number?
Yeah, I think part of it has to do with legislation, right? So there are states and cities that have basically said you cannot use AI to stack rank candidates. So we're constantly balancing, we talk about ethical AI, meaning we're treating your data, and you fairly. We're using it for good, that kind of a thing. So in many instances, you can't. And the human beings still come in and make the judgment at the end of the day. So it's not AI deciding who gets hired. It's a force multiplier. It's helping bubble, the candidates that contextually are the best fit. And again, it's what they've endured, where they work, all those different things. So it's really looking at not just hard skills, but attributes as well.
I love that. And on the website, it talks about a phrase that I've heard twice now. So can you describe what time to slate means?
Yeah. Yep. So it's a metric. So basically it's from the time a requisition opens until the time that the hiring manager begins to receive, qualified, interested, and available candidates. So it's one of, and the metrics are, a lot of them will stay the same, but there are new ones. So when I think about what are traditional recruiting metrics, it's time, cost, quality, and quantity. Yep. Right. All the time too. Time from open to first submit, time to fill, time to start, different things like that. And then I think that we realize that if we were going to really be able to do that much better of a job by matching, we should be able to impact things like a mishire rate, which we don't talk about a lot. Everybody has one. I defined it. I guess we collectively agreed that we would consider a mishire, whether it was regrettable or regrettable attrition, in the first 6 months. Okay. Didn't mean it was a bad candidate, just meant for whatever reason it didn't work out. And we kind of formulated this hypothesis that if we were, really doing this at a much higher level, better quality matches, et cetera, we should decrease. And again, contextually looking at the candidates, what they've endured, we should be able to decrease that. So we set a company goal that we would cut that down by 50% in 3 years. We cut it down by 50% in 7 months. It's amazing. We look at the cost of a mishire. They say it's 2 to 3 times the base salary of the employees. It's very expensive.
What customers is Findem working with right now that have interesting use cases?
Oh gosh, a lot right now, and I would say probably the most interesting use cases we have are ones that we're not quite ready to talk
Yeah,
about.
right
So I'll
on.
just simply say,
Fair.
stay tuned. We've got a lot happening.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's totally fair. I want to go back to what you mentioned: time, quality,
Time, cost,
cost,
quality, quantity.
and quantity.
Yeah.
A lot of times I hear recruiters leave out that quantity piece. And I think it's super important to talk about because we've all had those hiring managers where you send them 20, 30 candidates and they're still not satisfied with the pool, their slate. When we index on becoming strategic advisors to the business, it involves pushing back. It involves telling a hiring manager, hey, look, like this is not how we're going to operate an SLA to the business. How do you think recruiters can become more strategic and be able to have those conversations and get away from that traditional white glove service jump when the hiring manager says jump?
Yeah. So this is part of within the whole transformation journey. Companies they're under pressure to bring in some kind of an AI solution, and they bring it in. They try to use it in the same way. So we've trained just like we've trained our customers how to buy. Right. We've trained our hiring managers how to consume. So I took kind of a very Moneyball approach to
Okay.
my team. So I had the batting averages of every single recruiter. The first thing to think about is this: like I would hear a lot that when I interview recruiting leaders, how do they manage their teams? Well, they each need to make 10 submits per week, and it's really interesting because if you take a look under the covers, you've got recruiters that have a 2-to-1 submit to interview to hire ratio, and you've got some that have a 12-to-1. So for the one that has a 12-to-1, they really need to do 120 that week, not 10, to get the same results as somebody who has a much higher batting average. We One of the, I guess, unintended consequences that took a lot of communication and enablement with the hiring managers was the fact that when you take a sharpshooting approach versus a shotgunning approach, your volume's going to significantly drop. You don't have the filler candidates there. So when we went with Findem, our volume decreased significantly, but the quality went through the roof.
Yep.
And I was getting calls, panicked from leaders telling me your recruiters they're not working. I'm not getting this. And I would say, hey, look, do you understand right now? This is not this is not the candidate buffet anymore where you've
Correct.
got a heaping plate of stuff. This is this is a piece of grilled chicken and broccoli. It's better for you, right? You're going to save time, money, etc. If you take a look at traditionally the way it's been done, how many candidates that you talk to from a recruiting perspective, a manager, how many they interview to get to a hire? I mean, it's incredible. It's hidden costs. It's incredibly expensive. And every hour a hiring manager spends interviewing, they're not doing their whatever their function is, right? So there's a huge opportunity cost to the company.
When I think about digital transformation in the HR tech stack, we saw on the recruiting side a few major advancements in my time in the last 10 years. One was mobile optimized applicant tracking systems so candidates could apply from their phone.
Yeah.
And then the second, I think, is this idea of SMS. So certain candidates aren't responding to phone calls, aren't responding to email sequences, don't have a LinkedIn profile. So, how is the digital transformation with AI different from some of the things that we've already seen?
Yeah. So I think if you think about the reverse story of a hiring manager getting a ton of unqualified applicants, I think the reason why people are not answering messages like they used to is they're just getting spammed, right? They're just getting 1,000 messages a day. And it really doesn't matter if it's a text, if it's on WhatsApp in Europe, or if it's an in-mail, if it's an email or whatever else. What's happening is that the match quality for opportunities presented is so low that you just stop opening up the inbox, right? So I think in the same way that we can deliver, really targeted, qualified, interested, available candidates to a hiring manager, we also owe that to the people we're going after, which is to not waste their time and fill their inboxes. So I really think that it works in reverse as well. And I think that we'll used to get excited when you got an email about an opportunity. I remember during the days of the Great Resignation.
Oh, sure.
Like 10 emails a week on things. Today, I always find it funny. I'll get a text telling me that I've been, recognized as somebody who's qualified to be, a warehouse worker for Amazon. You've got to wonder, like, how is this happening? Yeah, right.
So, when you think about the sea of vendors, you can come out here and buy anything you want. I think about a strategic TA leader coming to market with budget after they've done their research. They've broken down the candidate funnel into a specific candidate journey. they've identified the process, they've looked at the data, and then they start writing checks. A lot of folks in this space tend to buy from those referrals. It's an emotional buy. If you're in sales, good luck tracking customer intent data.
Mm-hmm.
What are you thinking about when it comes to procuring software, especially with AI and the legislation moving so quickly?
Yeah, a couple things. First of all, is you do have to start with the end in mind, right? What are the things you're going to index on? So one of the things that was different for us, it was all of the normal things you would look at. So you take a look at results, you look at compliance, you look at, user experience and things like that. We really wanted to index on the recruiter experience for us. So that was one of the lenses we were reviewing our decision through was the, obviously hiring manager and candidates always top of mind, but recruiters, my philosophy was happy recruiters do better work kind of a thing.
Yeah, I love that.
And recruiters a lot of times just complain about the tools. And I was thinking to myself, could you imagine building a tech stack that was just so slick, so automated, making their life so much easier that the tool set actually became a retention mechanism?
Yep.
So another company called them and said, and they, this is how we do it. And there was be like, I could never go back to doing that.
Correct.
I think the other thing that we're seeing out there as it relates to the procurement piece is there's just a lot of pressure right now. Everyone's talking about AI. We've all seen the stats on how many are actually operationalizing it. So there's this pressure from the C-suite to HR, from HR to TA. What's your story around AI? And what we actually have is the reverse of doing this whole thought out process is we're going to, buy something and then we're going to try to use that the same way we've used the other tools in the past. When you think about, transformation starts with a mindset. And that is how you procure what you're looking for, how you're going to work it around your existing processes. What processes change? Even down to the core DNA of your recruiting organization, right? Do you have the right folks doing the right things, right? 15 years ago, if you were hiring a recruiter, you would talk about things like their Rolodex. Not relevant today, right? So what is? And again, back to the storytelling, the prepping, things like that. So the procurement, I think, starts with the end in mind. And you've got to kind of work through that whole journey map of what you're looking to accomplish. And the other thing I'd say is this, it should be in support of the overarching company goals.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
I think if TA is going to be more strategic in the future, and if HR is truly going to earn a seat at the table, which they largely haven't earned, it's going to be speaking the language of the business.
Absolutely.
When I think about recruiters and TA leaders speaking that language, it's what is the strategic plan? What are the OKRs for my remit, for my team? And what are the 3 to 4 KPIs that I can assign to a recruiter and talk about in their weekly one-on-ones so they know how they can perform and deliver excellence to the business? It also aligns mutual accountability to that SLA so that it doesn't become this service-based function that it has largely been in the past. How do you see recruiting be more strategic and speak that business language?
Yeah. So I think we've got a good start, which is now we have most products out there will have some kind of analytics. They have graphs, they have charts. The next step is, what does this mean? What actions do I take? When I take a look at how data is used in most organizations today, it's usually in one of two ways. It's a look back. So they'll come to a QBR and say, hey, this is what we did for you last quarter. Or it's a snapshot of right now. You've got 120 open recs. You've got this many. If you take a look at the patterns within data over years and years and years, when I was with one of the big, software companies and I came in and took a new organization over in January, we got hit with 600 new openings for sales reps. And as I looked over 5 years of data, guess what? It was every January that happened. So the question is, why weren't we acting in October to build the team up and have them ready for that wave, right? It's being able to read the tea leaves with data. And I think that's when you really become a strategic partner to the business. And I'll share a story for us of what we did to align. So at my last organization, we had 3 overarching corporate goals. One was a top line revenue number, one was a Wall Street metric, and one was something else. It was like free cash flow, whatever. So 7 months after we had implemented Findem, we went into the beginning of a fiscal year for the first time ever at full headcount with our quota carrying sales reps. Okay, so imagine if you're entering a fiscal year down 50 or 100 sales reps that have a 7-figure quota, chances of hitting it are next to nothing. So the end of the story is we crushed our numbers, right? We hit our top line goal, and then from the free cash flow and the savings perspective, we were kind of staring down the barrel of about a 70% increase for our current tool set, right? We eliminated that. With the functionality of Findem, we were able to sunset a few other products.
Awesome.
And we showed a $500,000 a year cost savings. So that was the story that was articulated to the C-suite and to the board. It was pretty powerful.
That's great. I love that you talk about sales hiring because I come from the tech startup world. I hire G&A, go to market, engineering, product design roles. A lot of times people think that hiring sales reps is easy. Sometimes it just comes down to understanding the business metrics of how comp plans work, what motivates a sales individual, how are you going to buy out commissions at certain times of the year. Recruiters can ask a lot of these questions of their sales candidates up front. And that's where I think pipelining versus sourcing really matters. How does Findem help recruiters pipeline so that when a rec does drop, they've got those short lists of candidates that they can outreach and get into an interview and make that hire in 30 days?
Yeah, that's part of our nurture, right? I remember early on in my recruiting days, we used to talk about finding good people on bad days. There were no talent communities. There were no CRM systems that were, sending them a note once a quarter. So I think through our CRM and our nurturing campaigns, if somebody's not ready today, right, that we can continue to stay in touch with them, build a relationship with them. And sales is tough, right? Because if you are a high producing sales rep, the way the plans are designed, they're designed that you're always going to leave something on the table, right? So again, back to really conveying that opportunity and why is this worth walking away from that? The other piece that I would say with any of our roles, I look at an open job as a business problem, right? And you can tie impact to not filling a rec to just about anything, right? If it's a customer service rec, you're going to look at longer wait times. Quota's easy, right? If it's engineering, maybe a product doesn't get released on time, or maybe an upgrade doesn't get done. So at the end of the day, if you think about what we're doing, we're brand ambassadors, right? We're the PR department and we're solving business problems.
When I think about intake and kickoff calls, one of the most important questions a recruiter can ask is, do we really need this person?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I think in many cases, the recruiter probably doesn't feel empowered to ask that question to the hiring manager, right? Because they're sometimes relegated to that order taking. It's like, this is what it is. Don't question it. Go out and find it. I think within the intake, part of what's been missing is the intake is generally produces like a laundry list of skills, but really doesn't talk about what the expectations are in the role. We don't convey the culture. We don't do all of those things to paint the full picture. So it becomes very one-sided. This is what we're looking for. Do you have 5 years of this? Have you, XYZ versus kind of like that balanced give and take. In the interview process, you're either buying or you're selling, right? So generally, if you're the one calling the candidate, you're in sell mode, they're in buy mode. And at a certain point, you need to see that start to shift where now they're interested, they're exciting, and they're starting to sell back to you on why it makes sense for them to be considered for the role.
And that's the thing I always think about. You mentioned years of experience. So David, you say in this job description, you want somebody with 5 years of experience. Just to make sure, if I find the perfect candidate that meets all the other criteria, but they only have 4 years of experience, you don't want to talk to them, right?
Yeah, that's what being a talent consultant is and an advisor, right? It's having those questions, the thought-provoking questions. And, they're always going to come back and say, oh, yeah, I would definitely. I just, in my experience, if you don't have 5 years, you don't, but you do have the overachievers and the outliers.
That's where 3D data comes in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Talk about that.
Well, I mean, again, it enriches the data. So it's a much more robust story of who someone is, where they've been, and what they've endured, the growth that they've been through, right? If you take somebody who has 4 years of experience at a company that had 10x growth in 3 years and they were there for it, right? You could probably make the argument that if, based on our current trajectory of 20% growth a year and they've been doing X, that they probably could handle the pace and the speed, right? Interviewing is all about mitigating risk. Right, that's the whole 9 yards. I think we haven't come fully to a point where we trust the data yet, right? So it's still hire on emotion and fire on fact.
This is actually one of the use cases for AI on blockchain that I'm kind of excited about. So we're going off script here.
Okay.
I haven't prepped you on this one. We do reference checks pretty regularly. High percentage of recruiters out there would raise their hand and say, yes, I do reference checks for hiring managers, or hiring managers conduct them. When we think about 3D data, by the world in which I operate in early stage startups, you can then make an inference to a specific candidate's information and prove if they were the individual that did that work with that 3D data that you're talking about. You make assumptions, you reverse engineer it. Well, if you're talking about early companies that have 50, 100 people, and you look at that enriched data and say, hey, we have a 95% assumption rate that this person is the only person that executed that business growth or that product design or that software or that sales growth. Those are things that really excite me about the future of technology. And we could almost bypass and eliminate the need for reference checks, employment verification, because if that data lived on blockchain, we would already have it at our fingertips. So I know we're getting the cart in front of the horse. What are you excited about with some of this technology that's coming out?
So one of the things you touch on is you would talk about the hard to find candidate is the purple squirrel, right? So in many companies, we will throw a dart in the map and say we want to hire 50 engineers in this city, as an example. The recruiting starts, there are struggles. It's kind of like this tension. And if we would have just used data to do like market analysis, you would have seen that there's no talent in this city, but if these other 3 cities would have yielded that same talent. So I think back to what excites me is that I think that the technology really elevates the recruiter. They can speak much more intelligently to market conditions, to even, if you think about, we have a lot of recruiters who never actually did the work. Yep. Right. They weren't an engineering leader but they're hiring for engineers for sure. So if you take a look, when our candidate slate is presented, we validate why and we show all of the reasons why, and then you're able to basically click a button and say, help me understand why is this candidate a good fit? Help me understand how do I best present the capabilities of this candidate to a manager. And when we think about, especially for the earlier in career recruiters, maybe they have 4 to 8 years. This actually has them. It's training them, if you think about it, because now like they're okay. This is why it makes sense. So now as I'm looking at more candidates, I understand why this candidate was a fit, and it's really elevating them to be able to earn that seat at the table, because now they can speak intelligently to the hiring manager. It's not just, well, hey, I think this person's good. Let me know what you think. It's this is why. You're getting this candidate. This is how they check the boxes from a skills and from an attributes perspective, from a cultural perspective, XYZ. This is what they've, the background they've come with all the 3D data. Now you're giving just like a much more robust picture to a hiring manager, and you're truly advising on talent. You're not just flipping stuff over the wall.
When I think about procuring recruiting software, it's all about understanding the day of a recruiter. If a recruiter wakes up, they log on to LinkedIn, they log on to email, they spend 2 hours interneting, and they spend 6, 7 hours on the phone, maybe an hour or 2 doing some admin work, sending notes to a hiring manager, pinging Slack messages. Recruiters have short attention spans. I think there's a lot of fun and enjoyment in doing that research about companies, about the growth story, the product story. That 3D data enriched into the platform where a recruiter is sourcing and reviewing candidates helps them be wildly efficient. It keeps their attention on their candidate pool when you're scrolling through a list of 10 folks to outreach. It keeps them closer to contacting that person on the phone. So it really comes down to how fast a recruiter can move. And an early career recruiter, it's all about at-bats. If Findem allows candidates with that 3D data to research faster, by default, you're going to have more at-bats as a recruiter and potentially grow your career. Can you talk a little bit about how implementing the right software can enable recruiters?
Yeah, I think back to my earliest of recruiting days, and I was at a really, really big software company, and third-party agency usage was it was $10-20 million a year in fees, right? And my mandate was to drive that down to 0. And as I really began to investigate, like these managers really like to work with those third parties, and the reason why was because of the passion. They would sell. Yep, it'd be like, listen, if I'm not right, don't ever call me again. But this person, XYZ, whatever, and they were passionate. There's also a different incentive mechanism there, right? But sure, I think per your point, you've got to love. This is a really interesting industry. Like we said, it's kind of like a sales role, but the difference is our product can get up and walk out the door at any point. Once a deal struck. So I think that the efficiency, which means like from an energy perspective, right? They should have they should wake up charged up with their day. They're not bogged down at that administrative level. They understand, they have context. It should boost confidence of how you communicate with the hiring manager. It boosts how you communicate with the candidate. Again, what happens when they say no? Do you understand? Well, hey, listen, give me 5 minutes, right? Let me share three things that you should know about Findem, right? Number one is, let me talk to you about our 3-year growth plan and the trajectory, that we're on. Number two, let me talk about the fact that we have the biggest labeled data set that exists in the world. Number three, you can check. We were just listed in the top 5,000 fastest growing companies. We're at 466. We're in the top percent of all 10 companies. This is a rocket ship, and we're changing the world, right? It's like it's like, okay, I'm
fired up.
gonna listen, right? That was dope, but that's what's missing, I think.
All right, since we just did the pitch, you just pitched me as the candidate. What's your go-to interview question?
Oh gosh, it depends on what the role is, but for me, I think that I want to understand and get under the covers of how things were done.
Yep.
I sold X. Super. How? Walk me through. Who was your first contact? What was the message? Did you bring in executive sponsors? Walk me, I really want to understand, right, what their specific impact on a certain situations. That's the behavioral part of the interview, which is really interesting to understand. But you also have to understand and how to interpret the answers, right?
Yep.
So you've got to be a student of this. But yeah, my favorite interview question is anything that really gets the heart of, can you show me how you did something and can you repeat it?
Yeah,
Right?
100%. When I think about sourcing tools, I break it down into eras. And currently, I think about technology like Findem is sourcing 3.0. Sourcing 2.0, we can call it Chrome extensions and CRMs over a LinkedIn page. Sourcing 1.0 is buy your lead lists. I heard there once were directories that
Big blue books of lists. Yeah.
yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
So when I think about sourcing 3.0, I'm really excited because I've only ever had to source. And I know there are a lot of recruiters out there who can rely on inbound applicants. So there are a lot of recruiters out there that now in these periods of ups and downs in the market, when they have to fill a pipeline, they actually realize they don't like recruiting. So when I think about this evolution of the field, evolution of technology, there's no rule that says hiring has to be done a certain way. There's no recruiting emergency room. There's no recruiting jail. With AI, I think there is a world in which hiring managers are that human in the loop and they don't work with recruiters. So there will be a natural culling of those who have a job title recruiter.
Yeah.
Recruiting is a business operation process first and a job title second. How do you think about recruiters being sourcers even in an employer's market?
Well, I think the markets move in cycles, right? The ups, the downs. Right now, this is an employer-driven market, and when I think back, 3.5, 4 years ago, it's like you were rolling the red carpet out and begging candidates to have conversations with you. I think you bring up a good point when we talk about evolution. It's also the evolution of the skill set.
Yeah.
I think that it's table stakes 2-3 years from now for recruiters. If you have not been able to effectively operationalize AI within your processes, to me, I feel like it's like being asked, how to use, Word or Excel and PowerPoint. It's table stakes. So we hear this all the time. It's not AI that's going to take your job. It's somebody who knows how to use AI who's going to take your job. And I think I look a lot to kind of the consumer world to see what the patterns are. And, I can remember growing up, you'd go into a Walmart or a Target, you'd see 26 cashier stations lined up, right? A couple of years ago, you came in and they were all everyone was gone. And you're walking through a self-checkout with a head of lettuce you have no idea how to measure it, enter. That's always something someone else has done. So there was no enablement that happened. And a lot of people went to online or they went to the more expensive supermarket because they still unloaded the cart for you, right?
Sure.
Now, when you take a look at the kind of the maturity curve with there, you'll go into a Super Target or Walmart and they'll still have 2 or 3 for the folks who want to wait in line and do that. And then they'll have a rectangular shape. They'll have 8 cash registers, but there's one human being sitting at the end, right? So we went from 26 to 0. Now we're at a 1-to-8 ratio, if that makes sense. So they're effectively doing what 8 would do. And the consumer now has the confidence because we've provided some enablement for you, right? So if I have a problem and something, doesn't ring up, we're right there, right? So I think we're going to see that maturation curve within this industry as well. I don't think recruiting's going away, but I think that, for every 10 jobs that are lost, you're going to see 2 reemerge,
Yep.
you know?
And I think we're going to see recruiting move more towards that exec search model, where recruiters are just a little bit more strategic. They've got a little bit more swagger. There's always going to be value of a third party leveraging a candidate and being in their ear and saying, look, David, I know you got these 2 offers, man, but like, honestly, if I were you, I would take this job. And here's why. Sometimes that type of approach can be executed from an in-house recruiter, but there are times in my recruiting experience, even in the last year, where I'm working with a founder and they're like, hey, I need you to push this candidate over the line. Like, we're going to work with you because we need you at the end to close. Recruiters got to close. You can't just rely on your employer brand. You can't just rely on a comp philosophy. I think a lot of recruiters are lazy. I think a lot of recruiters rely on inbound. They just reverse engineer with a little bit of data to know their pass-through rates, and they rely on an employer brand or a global household name to do their job for them. That's why I think recruiting is not a one-size-fits-all profession. And I think we're going to see the cream rise to the crop in the next couple of years for folks that really have the chops to do this and make it a career like you for the last 20 plus years.
I think we're going to see. I think that gap between the C-suite and the black hole of what happens in the recruiting organization. I think you're going to see that coming closer and closer together. And every CEO will talk about the fact that people are the most important thing. Yet, how many CEOs actually sit and spend time with their heads of TA have ever?
Yeah.
Right? Especially the larger companies, it just doesn't happen. I think that we're going to see standardization. I think that metrics are going to be table stakes, where I talk to a lot of teams right now and I'll ask, what's the big needle you want to move this year? What are your key metrics? A lot of times as well, I mean, as long as we're filling positions, they're happy. It's kind of like squeaky. As long as they're not yelling, that's kind of our measure of what success is. That's not going to be acceptable much longer, honestly. It's just not. So I think you're going to see talent acquisition really emerging as more of a corporate business function.
Yeah.
As we talked about, data, charts, graphs, speaking the language of the business, predictive analytics, not being great at telling the past, but being able to begin to tell the future a little bit.
Yeah, I think back to a CEO that I worked with. I remember he caught me in the lunchroom once and he was like, recruiting is our most important priority, hiring great folks. It's like, okay, cool, prove it. You're paid 25th to 50th percentile comp.
Yeah.
Like, prove it, bro. Come on. Like, don't tell me that and not back it up, because sometimes we hear these business tropes. We're going to hire, develop, and retain the best people. And that's just a phrase. We talk about best practices. According to who? I think sometimes recruiting can just adopt these things we've heard and think they're strategic when really it's just corporate speak. And white glove service is another perfect example of that. So I'm excited for the disruption, to use that word, of this space, because there's no one out there is saying like, yeah, recruiting has it figured out. We've largely been doing the same thing. So why not flip this on its head and go out there and have some more fun? Because at the end of the day, it's candidate experience that matters. It's influencing human behavior. And it starts by showing up and shaking a hand and meeting and interacting with your candidates you're going to place.
I love that comment you made to the CEO. I had a walk with one of my former CEOs. And I asked him a question. I said, hey, you want everybody in the company to kind of think and act as an owner, right? He said, of course. He said, well, why did we stop paying sales reps or why did we stop providing any RSUs for them? Right? Exactly. They're not. So whenever you are a great recruiter, you're like the secret weapon. You're they really trust that. But you also, a friend of mine said a couple of weeks ago, we're in a time right now within talent acquisition that in a lot of cases, people are more concerned with keeping their job than doing their job.
Yep.
You have to have a point of view. You have to be a thought leader, unless you want to be just viewed as a cost center versus a strategic and a competitive differentiator.
100%. And we can't redefine gap. So I'm excited about when we think about moving forward with recruiters becoming more strategic. How do you think recruiting can finally earn a seat at that table?
Data is one, results is the other, right? You have to be right more often than you're not right. And I think at the end of the day, you've got to be able to tie your activities and your actions to impact at the corporate level, right? You've got to move the needle and you've got to take that responsibility. I think a lot of times within recruiting, it's once the hire's done, it's done. And there's not like any skin in the game afterward. I did my job. I got them here. You keep them here. We should be, really dialed in at the most molecular level of what the mission and vision of the company is, and we ought to be able to move the needle and then be able to prove it and articulate it, and again, take all that great charts, data, et cetera, and convert it into, executive briefs, letting them know what you did, how you moved the needle for the company, and why you're a function that they just can't live without.
It's amazing. What advice do you have for recruiters to be better at their job on Monday?
I think this is a time where we all have to, especially those of us that have been in it for a while, right? The decision around AI, it's been made, right? The answer is, what are you going to do about it? I think that take the extra time, educate yourself. The world has changed. It's in corporate, it's adapt or die, right? So I would say that if you want to have a relevant skill set 2-3 years from now, then you've got to figure out what other people have already begun to figure out.
It's amazing. And then last question, what's the white paper you're about to drop?
Oh yeah. So I was just kind of really exploring my own thoughts around what are the challenges, why the lack of standardization, what is that gap between recruiting and the C-suite, what are the things we need to really do and get very proficient at to earn and stay, at the table and be really viewed as a bona fide corporate function. Talent acquisition, even called that, it's like 30-40 years old, right? The CFO function's been around for 1,200 years. So we're still very, very new at this, and there's no linear path into it. There's no recruiting degrees or coursework, right? So I think, I think that I was just kind of exploring those thoughts, and I think we need to kind of shine a light on what some of those gaps and challenges are. And I think we need to challenge the C-suite to get a little bit more, active with their recruiting teams, a little bit more communicative, and a little bit better in lockstep. If people are really the number one asset at the company, then we need to probably spend a little bit more time focusing on that.
I love that you mentioned the historical context of the CFO. There's an interesting stat about humanity that I love, and it's that humans invented compound interest before they invented the wheel.
Oh, wow.
And I think about recruiting being one of the oldest professions. If I'm a caveman and you're a caveman and you got to push a boulder up a hill, well, I might know another caveman a couple caves over that can help us out.
Yeah.
That's recruiting. David, I'm excited about the future of Findem. I'm excited and grateful for this conversation. Thank you for your intentionality, for your thought leadership, for what you're building. Thanks for coming on the show,
It's
man.
been fun. We'll have to do it again.
Hell yeah.
All right, man. Thank you.